Welcome to the Rural Reporter's Notebook. By the time this goes out, it will be Wednesday, April 23rd. I'm Claire Carlson, and I'm here with my co host, Julia Tilton.
Happy Earth Day. If you didn't know, Earth Day was yesterday, April 22nd. So, in honor of that, Claire and I thought we'd do something in theme for our episode this week.
We're here with Meg Haywood Sullivan and Amelia Joy, both from Nature Is Nonpartisan, a new coalition building organization that's both nonpartisan and nonprofit. Thanks for coming on to the Rural Reporter's Notebook.
Thanks for having us.
We'd love to start off by giving you both a chance to introduce yourselves. Meg, if you want to go first, and then Amelia, you can jump in. Start by telling us where you're from.
I'm from Boston originally, and I live in San Francisco area now. And I am the chief marketing officer here at Nature Is Nonpartisan.
My name is Amelia Joy. I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Florida, but have kind of hopped all over the country at this point. Lived in Alabama, South Dakota, and now I'm in Washington, D.C. And I'm the communications director for Nature is Nonpartisan.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Nature is Nonpartisan? I know it's a recently launched organization, but can you tell us why it started?
So we launched just about a month ago, and it's been full on, which is amazing. I mean, I think now more than ever, it's really obvious how important it is to have nonpartisan action and having people across the aisle come together and work together. And the really amazing thing is nature is one of those few areas where when you remove the lingo and the verbiage and the jargon, we really do agree on a lot of things. We may come at it from different perspectives, but the core of what we believe is very, very much aligned quite often. So I joined in particular because, as someone who is on the left, I was really frustrated with the inaction of being able to work with folks on the right to really make change for the environment. And we can't solve environmental challenges without working across the aisle. It doesn't work. So that's one of the main reasons why I decided to join Nature's Nonpartisan. And Amelia has a really different take, but also very interesting take.
Yeah, and so the cool thing about Nature is Nonpartisan is that we're dedicated to being that group that reaches a hand across the aisle. And it's a really neat experience for me. Our staff is split 50-50. Our board and our advisors are split 50-50, Republicans and Democrats. And a lot of us have gotten a lot of heat for working across the aisle, which is not unexpected, but is kind of disappointing when you think about it, because the only way that we're going to create long lasting change is by reaching a hand across the aisle. And I'm on the conservative side, and so my experience with the environment and with nature has largely been through agriculture and working with America's farmers and growing up on the water in Florida. And so coming together and finding that I have a lot more in common with someone like Meg, who self identifies as a crunchy California environmentalist, has been really fun. And it's been really rewarding to find that that kind of compromise and agreement on something as basic as caring for our planet can be found between two people who the media would probably say we wouldn't agree on anything, but that couldn't be further from the truth.
Honestly, too, we're looking back at like the legacy and the history of environmentalism in America. And it historically was a very, very bipartisan topic. Folks worked across the aisle, Republicans, Democrats, et cetera, worked together for the Endangered Species Act, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, national parks, et cetera. This has only been a recent phenomenon that it's been kind of caught in this like partisan culture wars. So we've shown and history has shown that it doesn't have to be a partisan talking point, and we're really working to be on the cultural side of that change and really showcase the ability to work with folks where we don't agree on everything, but we do agree on nature, and we have our own beautiful perspectives of why nature is important. And I think that's what our country really needs right now, is this more common ground and more grace in understanding each other.
I want to dig into this because this is exactly why Claire and I wanted to do an episode on this. And just hearing you talk about the media and the way that the media portrays environmentalism in 2025 and why it's part of the culture war. And so I'm curious because in thinking about rural places, environmentalism often excludes rural people and rural places. They're very rarely shown engaging in advocacy or in environmental movements because of assumptions that rural politics, predominantly conservative politics, don't align with an environmental or climate agenda. And so it's awesome to have both of you in the room right now because I'm curious how you square your environmentalism with your politics and why this is so confusing for mainstream media.
Thinking about people who identify as environmentalists, rural communities are the first communities that I think of, but they're also the people who are going to say that they don't identify as environmentalists. In the 70s and 80s, that number of Americans who identified as environmentalists was at about 85% of Americans. Today, that number is down to about 40%, which is a crazy drop off in just over 30 years. And that's because of how divisive our politics has gotten. And the environment has felt like an issue that has only been talked about on the left side of the aisle, and these rural communities have felt left behind. My personal experience with the agricultural communities, especially, I served as Governor Kristi Noem's press secretary in South Dakota. I lived in South Dakota for 2 years in that role. And then I handled communications for Brooke Rollins prior to her becoming Secretary of Agriculture at the federal level. And so both of them came from farmers and ranchers and prioritized rural communities and did what they could to help the American farmer. And when you talk to these farmers in middle America, they will tell you that they feel like no one cares more about the land than they do. They rely on the land for their livelihoods. This is land that they inherited from their parents, oftentimes their grandparents, and has been in their family for generations, and they want to do all that they can to care for it. But what they don't want is a big government or coastal elites who have never stepped foot on a farm in their life coming and telling them how to run their own farm, how to care for their own land. And when you get two people, you get a farmer and then an East Coast Democrat together and actually talk about that, you can come to an understanding of where that farmer is coming from. And you can discuss what some realistic policy options are for them, what kind of policies might help them to be able to do their job better based on the understanding that they're not cynical towards the environment. They're not opposed to action on the climate front, but they just want to make sure that they're able to do their jobs. And when they're left to do that, oftentimes they'll choose the most environmental option anyways because that's beneficial for them. They just have a distrust in government, which as a conservative I could completely understand that, but this distrust of people who don't agree with you is where the problem lies. And just getting people to sit down and have these conversations is step 1, and every other step stems from that. And so that's what we're trying to organize at Nature is Nonpartisan, is starting that conversation, encouraging people to meet with people that they might not agree with and just have the uncomfortable conversation because you never know what kind of good could come out of it.
Also, too, as a member of the coastal liberal elite, one thing that media that tailors to, say, the coastal elite or even coastal conservatives oftentimes misses is changing the framing based on the different cultures and communities that you're trying to reach within our country. We have so many, our country is this beautiful, wild melting pot with people with all different perspectives, and how you talk about things should differ based on the audience. Someone that lives in a rural community is not necessarily going to be thinking of things based on a more urban context. They're going to be thinking about their families, they're going to be thinking about their farm. And so talking about pertinent environmental issues based on things that are happening around them is probably the best way to reach people. And same goes with city folk talking about farms and ag land. They're not going to necessarily understand what that means or have that perspective. And so meeting people where they're at, I think the media has done a disservice in getting all different types of folks to the table talking about environmentalism because they've had these like blanket ways of approaching really important environmental topics. So, I think changing the wording and the framing, number one, and then number two, focusing on shared local issues that people can feel and see. as ways to really get more folks at the table across the political spectrum to unite around our environment.
So much of that really resonates. And I think it's really interesting some of the tactics that you already mentioned about just messaging is going to look different depending on your audience. But I'm curious if there are other tactics that Nature is Nonpartisan have been using to do this coalition building across aisles. What are you currently working on?
Our policy director, his name is Ben Cassidy, he came to us from Safari Club International, is actively building the Nature's Nonpartisan Coalition, filled with all kinds of environmental groups and businesses from both ends of the spectrum. And Meg has kind of touched on the cultural shift, but this also extends to a political shift and a government shift as well, working with different environmental groups from across the aisle, as well as different members of Congress and government officials from across the aisle, whether that's at the federal level or state and local level. This kind of change is important at all levels of our government. Bringing people to the table who might have felt like their voice hasn't been heard recently, and bringing them into the fold of environmentalism and bringing them to the table, as well as just getting back to a sense of bipartisanship in this country on the environment, but also on things that aren't related to nature as well. Just getting people used to working together again when most people wouldn't dream of Republicans and Democrats in Congress coming together on a bill, even if the content of it seems really basic and makes a lot of sense to most Americans. And so, working on some bipartisan legislation through Congress as well to hopefully get back to the days when the first Earth Day was a bipartisan initiative, those first few bills associated with the EPA, the Clean Air, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, those were all overwhelmingly bipartisan. And we just don't see that anymore, but we should, because when you talk to people about the actual issues, you get results like 90% of Americans want clean air and clean water. 95% of Americans want to make sure that our endangered species and our wildlife are protected and that we're restoring their habitats. Crazy numbers, more popular than just about any other political issue in this country. And yet, that phrase environmentalism, the phrase climate change has become such a divisive thing. And so restoring that across the country on a cultural level, but also restoring it at the highest levels of American governance as well.
We're focusing on policy. We're also focusing on highlighting historic wins and highlighting what's actually happening currently, too. There's around 13 nonpartisan bills being proposed right now for the environment, and no one's talking about that. It's important. Yes, it's a very divided time. It might be considered one of the most partisan times in American history, and yet there is still work that's being done. Democrats, Republicans working together for nature and celebrating these, I think, is very important because educating folks that it's possible, educating our legislators that we want to see more of this. I think that's where we also, as an organization, have a lot of power to highlight the good that's currently happening and also push for more of that.
Thinking about your team and building out your team and the impact that you are going to have, we noticed that most of you are members of the millennial or Gen Z generation. And so we wanted to ask about that. How does your makeup of your team inform your approach in a context where if you were to look at members of Congress, many of them are not millennials or Gen Z?
Well, we definitely are a young organization, and I think that's one of our superpowers. As we all know, young folks are inheriting the country and the environment, and it's critical to focus on them as we are the future leaders of this nation. And we're the ones that are inheriting all the challenges that we've experienced, especially on the environmental side. So that's one of the reasons why we are really leaning into that. And we're also leaning into social media as a platform to spread this messaging. I mean, that's how a lot of cultural change happens in the world right now is spreading through social. That's a way that you can activate and engage rural communities and coastal communities. This is a tool that is in everybody's back pocket, literally. And that is a way that we can really spread information about the past and working together, information about the present and where we are anticipating to grow this kind of nonpartisan environmental movement forward. So social media is one of our greatest assets, in addition of course, having a presence and helping policy push forward. But having younger folks at the table in those rooms too in DC is also incredibly important. So I'll let Amelia touch on the DC side of things.
Millennials and Gen Z care about the issue of the environment more than any generation before ours. We're the first generation to see it as our responsibility and an issue that we're not going to kick to future generations. We need to take care of it now. And so we approach that from the view that we're never actually going to do anything positive for the environment if we don't do it in a nonpartisan way. Otherwise, new party leadership is going to come in and they're going to spend their entire time undoing whatever the last administration did the last 4 years. And the cycle just continues. And especially on something like the environment, the policy can't even help the environment in 4 years or even 8 years. It needs to be something that's around for decades and generations. And that kind of policy doesn't exist if you don't do it in a bipartisan way, because the pendulum of American politics is going to keep swinging no matter what. And so, working across the aisle is the most important thing that we can do on this issue, but on all issues as well. And when I talk to my friends who are also members of Gen Z, they're frustrated with how partisan and how divided we've gotten as a country. We've grown up with social media and we've seen friendships and families fall apart over something as silly as political differences when that didn't used to happen. You used to love your people no matter what. And I personally think that if we continue down this path of division, the irony in us being more connected with social media and technology than we've ever been before, and yet people are just talking to their own echo chambers. They're not talking to new people anymore or people that they disagree with anymore. And yet we have so many resources to be able to do just that. It's frustrating. And if we continue down this path, it'll be, dare I say, the downfall of American democracy. We have to keep talking to each other. And so that's our biggest mission with Nature is Nonpartisan, is getting people talking and talking to people that maybe you disagree with someone on every single other issue, but you can agree that you like nature, you like going to the beach, you like skiing, and hey, we have something in common and we want to make sure that our grandkids get to do that thing that we love too.
Yep, Amelia hit the nail on the head with that, and these echo chambers can be dangerous, the algorithm can feed into that, and so I think that's why we've stirred the pot and gotten a lot of loud voices chatting about us already on the far left and on the far right, because this is an unexpected thing, but we're intentionally encouraging people to step outside of these echo chambers, to step outside of their comfort zones. We want people to be uncomfortable. We want to challenge the status quo because things aren't working and there's no reason why they shouldn't. And history has shown us that. So this is our opportunity.
Can you talk a little bit about what that chatter has been? I mean, how have people from both the left and the right been reacting to this work?
Well, all you need to do is go look in our comment section. There's some spicy ones, but that's anticipated. That's important. And honestly, we are representing the majority, 60, 80% of Americans. We're not tailoring our messaging or our work to the fringes. We're not looking to appease folks on the far right. We're not looking to appease folks on the far left. We're focusing on the majority of Americans. And are there some very loud voices on both of those extremes? Yes. And they're the ones that are stirring the pot and causing the trouble. But if anything, and I've been really excited to see this, people having constructive dialogue in our comment section too. It's pretty apparent whether you have a strong argument or you're just trying to shout for reasons unknown. And I think people are working this out in our comment section and we're encouraging that. I think having places of dialogue, having places to be conversing with folks that you don't agree on is rare. And it's incredibly important to have some area of unification. And what we've seen is an environment is one of those. It's interesting sign of the times, and I think it's showing us that we've been successful in our start because we've had equal pushback on both those extremes. I think if we have more pushback on one versus the other, course correct a little bit, but like it's been pretty equal, which has been fascinating actually.
It's been equal almost to the extent that it's laughable being in the middle of it, because you get people accusing us of being bought out by the fossil fuel industry, but then you also get people saying that we're trying to greenwash the conservative movement, that we're the Green New Deal in sheep's clothing. I mean, these things can't be true at the same time. And you have people leaving these comments under the same post. I'm like, secret option number three, none of the above. But that means that we're doing something right, just like Meg said. The people that are going to resonate the most with our message are not the people that are most likely to comment on social media. And that's exactly the issue that we're facing, right? Is that all you see on social media are the two extremes. The algorithm rewards anger, they reward people fighting with one another. They don't reward people who have good intentions and just want to start a simple conversation. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We've also had people pick specific members of our board and say, you can't trust this organization because they're associated with XYZ politician. And for every member of our board that you might disagree with, there's a member that you do agree with. And the same is true for people who are on the opposite side of the political spectrum. And that's the beauty of it, is that these people who may be viewed as polarizing figures agree that we need to protect the environment and want to have civil discussions about nature. And so it's been really cool, like Meg said, to see our comments become a little microcosm of that already happening. And hopefully we can do it on a much larger scale as we continue to grow.
As we close out here, any final thoughts on this Earth Day or day after Earth Day?
For me personally, every Earth Day, I see my social media feed flood with pictures of nature and people's favorite memories in nature. And while that's amazing, and I encourage everyone to continue sharing that because that can build those bonds that you don't expect with other people, go a step further and have the uncomfortable conversation with someone who you might not agree with, but share your favorite memory in nature with them and ask them what their favorite memory is in nature and find common ground. And just have the uncomfortable conversations is my biggest message, because the moment that we stop talking to each other is the moment everything falls apart. So just keep talking and find common ground and spend some time outside this Earth Day too. Always important.
I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of going for a hike with someone that you don't agree with. I've gone on many hikes with folks that I don't agree with, and there's beauty in that. There's beauty in sharing an experience outside with someone where you might have absolutely nothing else in common. But the fact that you're enjoying these beautiful trees, seeing butterflies, seeing creatures outside, and being in a national park, that's really important because it's part of us and part of being an American, being able to enjoy these things. So I would strongly suggest having that conversation with, say, that uncle of yours that you don't agree with on everything, going outside and having a hike with a neighbor who you don't see eye to eye on everything, just seeing different perspectives, seeing the natural world through different eyes. There's power in that. We are more powerful as a country because we're different, because we are Americans. We come from all different backgrounds, and all of our perspectives of nature are valid and equally important and beautiful. So celebrate that and get outside.
Thank you both so much. This was really wonderful to meet you both and get to hear about Nature Is Nonpartisan.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And if anyone feels so inclined, you can go to natureisnonpartisan.org and join us as we strive to make nature a nonpartisan issue in America again.
This episode of the Rural Reporter's Notebook was written by me, Claire Carlson, and Julia Tilton.
It was edited and produced by me, Julia Tilton.
Our executive producer is Joel Cohen.
Original music was composed by Quincy Ponver and Leo Pozell.
Thank you to the staff of the Daily Yonder and Rural Assembly for all their support in making this show possible.